Joining me now is Professor Kingsley Moghalu. He's a presidential candidate for the YPP. That's the Young Progressive Party. Good to have you join us in our political kitchen today.
Thank you.
Quite a lot has happened, and I must first of all say congratulations. You are the candidate. How did it go on the day of your primaries?
Well, it was really a beautiful exercise of democracy in action. There were more than 200 delegates of the party across the 36 states, mostly party executives who were there. It was very well organized. There was an atmosphere of festivity. It's a new political party, just about a year old. And so there's an air of expectation that we're going to be participating big time in the democratic process in Nigeria, and that we're aiming for victory. So in a sense, we felt like Emmanuel Macron's new political movement set to create massive disruptions and upsets in the Nigerian elections of 2019.
If you saw that coming, because what some Nigerians weren't too happy with you was why were you, coasting along with a packed agenda initially when you knew that this was what your party is about? Well,
like I've said, my participating in PACT was a mistake. It was an honest mistake, and I've apologized to my followers. I did it out of respect for the youth of this country, and I'm still saying to them to continue to support me. Unfortunately, the PACT process was hijacked and manipulated to some degree, and it became not what it was supposed to be. And naturally, because I had problems, fundamental problems with the process that arrived at the final results, I had to exercise my constitutional rights to move on. And even many people have noted that the outcomes of PACT raise questions about how serious Nigeria's new politicians are about confronting the current order. If you want to, speaking about outcomes, which, if you want to defeat the old order, the whole idea of PACT was for us to agree among ourselves and bring out the strongest candidate. And most people in Nigeria knew who the strongest candidate in the room was. So when the outcome happened, a lot of people, the preponderance of public opinion showed that their confidence was dealt a serious blow by the outcomes. I walked away because of the process, not because of the outcome. I was not satisfied with it. The fact that you sat through it is immaterial. If you go through a normal and real election, and at the end of the process, the vote is counted, and you believe that the process had some fundamental flaws, you have a right to reject the results and go to court. And it happens every day in every election in Nigeria. So I don't see why I'm being held to a double standard by anyone. I shouldn't become a prisoner of my honest intentions. If I did something in good faith, and some people were actually using the process for their own particular personal agenda, rather than what the pact was meant to be.
Professor Moghalu, I think you touched on a very important aspect, and that has to do with the old order, because one would have thought that the new breed of politicians coming into the fray would have been able to at least keep doing things that will wow the people, and also put them on their own.
That's why I've raised the question I've raised. You see, I am a mature person. I am a person who has, had a lot of experience in leadership across several institutions in Nigeria and in the world. So there's a way I see things that some people who may not be as experienced as I am may not be able to see things. It's all right to have good intentions. It's all right to want to change the world. But this is politics. If you want to dislodge the old order, you have to go in with a formation that is capable of disrupting the old order.
Do you have that formation?
The YPP has it.
Tell us more about this agenda of the YPP, perhaps.
Yes.
Because sometimes when we talk about formation, or we talk about an agenda, or a formula with which some politicians expect their followers to key into, it turns out to be the same of the same.
Oh no, the YPP is definitely not the same of the same. The Young Progressives Party, YPP, is a party that does not believe in the politics of greed. It's a party that believes in the ideal of progressivism. That is to say that our people, we are focused on the poor in this country. We are focused on inclusive politics and inclusive economic development. That's what we're focused on, while creating wealth opportunities for everyone. So, you know, we believe that the focus of politics is service. In fact, our slogan in the YPP is service to the people, because that's what you have not had in Nigerian politics. Nigerian politics is service by the politicians, for the politicians, of the politicians. So, and that's what you see in Nigerian politics, and that's why Nigeria is a very poor country today. The purpose for which we exist as a political party is to change this old order. It is more than a political party. It is a political movement. And the purpose is nothing short of the emancipation of the suffering masses of this country, all 200 million of us.
When you talk about Nigeria having so many poor, and you say Nigerians are suffering.
Yes.
Now, I'll bring it to your own area, because area of economy now. Yeah. Let's try to talk about,
yes,
you know, specifics. It was only recently HSBC as well as Forbes, mentioned Nigeria as one of the strongest economy for 2018. I don't know if you saw that release by Forbes.
Let me tell you one thing about measuring economies. It depends on what you're measuring. You can come out and say Nigeria has a healthy foreign reserve base of 45 billion, but it also has nearly 180 million who live in poverty out of 200 million people. What is more important to you? Is it the foreign reserves, or is it the people who live in poverty? The purpose of the economy for any political leader should be economic development and human welfare and progress. It is not economic growth statistics. And this is why a lot of our political leaders in Nigeria and in Africa are deceived by these economic growth numbers and glossy reports by economic publications measuring economic growth. There are three things that matter. Economic growth is one, economic development is another, economic transformation is another. These three things are very different, but they're complementary. So if you focus only on economic growth, which is the GDP number, that is how the total product of goods and services in a country in a given year, but you're not focusing on economic development, the quality of life. Do we have light in Nigeria?
Over the years, I think that's what the government over time has always focused on.
No, they haven't focused on it. Because
talking about the GDP.
Yes, they've always focused on GDP growth, and this is where I break away from them. That's the presidency that I will bring. The KINGSLEY MOGHALU presidency will be a focus on economic development, the human welfare and the standard and quality of life of Nigerian people. Do we have electricity 24/7? 60 years of independence, and we have 4,000 megawatts of electricity still. And you're counting to me a publication by some bank in Europe?
I'll come back to this. I'm not taking this off you.
No, I know. Let me just finish. It's very important that I finish this train of thought.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please. Because I've talked about economic development, which is very important. You know, healthcare, the healthcare system, the educational system. You know, how long, averagely, do we live in Nigeria? You know? We live average for about 50-something years, but most people in countries that are doing well live average 70 years. Then you now move to economic transformation. That is to say that the structure of the economy becomes productive fundamentally. It manufactures complex products and exports them. That is now when you begin to talk about the wealth of nations. GDP growth in and of itself does not produce the wealth of nations.
You know, I was actually going to stop you and, you know, put this, because you were a deputy governor of the Central Bank.
Yes, of course.
And I would have thought that being someone in academics and someone who has really got his hands on issues,
yes,
would have written to the government then, yes, while you served and, yes, say, hey, wait a minute,
yes,
this is not about looking at the GDP, just as you've highlighted.
Yes.
Did you at any point in time, you know, draw the attention of the government to help them? Because you're Nigerian, and
yes, of course,
if you're passionate about the survival of this country, then I'm quite sure you would have done something there.
Of course we did.
Let's go back to what you did then.
Of course we did. The central bank as an institution, don't forget, you had the governor and the 4 deputy governors, so it's a collective leadership system. We made several presentations to the government, both in the economic team and outside of the ambit of the economic team, about the direction in which the Nigerian economy should go. The fact that politicians who have different agendas and have very limited understanding of economic transformation decide to follow their agenda, which is not necessarily the agenda of the Nigerian people, cannot be blamed on us. We told the government what we thought. They don't have to follow it. Now, there's one problem I want to explain to you, or there's something I want to explain to you. Many people think that the Central Bank of Nigeria controls the whole Nigerian economy. No. The Nigerian economy, the management of the Nigerian economy is broken into three. One, national planning. That's why you have the Federal Minister of Planning. That is the economic planning responsibility. Two, fiscal policy. That is taxes and earnings of revenues from petroleum or other sources by the government. That's the Federal Ministry of Finance. Then three, monetary policy, which is the central bank's role, and financial regulation, central bank, and payments system regulation, central bank. People don't understand these differences. So they always kind of feel that everything that happens is the responsibility of the central bank. Let me also remind you that the Sanusi Lamido Sanusi Central Bank, in which I was the deputy governor, for financial stability, was a fantastically successful central bank. We brought inflation down to 8%. From double digits, we brought inflation crashing down. By the time we left in 2014, inflation was at 8%. After we left, it went back up to 17, 18% and started coming down now to about 13% or so.
Why was that?
No, we'll come back to that. Now,
yeah, well, we have to. We must
come to that. Number two, the financial system was massively reformed by the central bank, and I was in charge of the implementation of those reforms. We stabilized the Nigerian banks. We made sure that no bank failed after the global financial crisis. We made sure that no depositor lost one kobo in the banks. In Europe and in other parts of the world, banks were failing. People were losing their money. But in Nigeria, we held the fort, and we held it successfully. Now, we also restructured the banks. We have global banks, national banks, local banks. And we created other avenues of development, finance, and so on. We started the Nigerian incentive-based risk-sharing agricultural lending system. It's called NERSAL, whereby we began to fund agriculture in a market-based principle, but we provided some kind of insurance for failures of the market. Now, that program is still on till today, and it's helping a lot of Nigerian farmers. So, the fact is that we were very successful in our part of the economy. Now, the politicians who were looking for oil money, Nigeria's oil resources were earning $100 per barrel for quite a while at that time. And yet they could save nothing. We kept talking about the importance of saving for the rainy day. They wouldn't listen. Nigerian politicians are a visionless and profligate lot. And that is why I'm running for president. Because I don't want to be a technocrat anymore, making recommendations for how Nigeria can be better, and politicians with selfish and corrupt agendas are ignoring you.
No,
I want to be a political leader.
I can imagine how painful. I know how painful it can be when you come up with your idea, because virtually everyone must have actually done a thing or two, growing up, and you have a fantastic idea, and you bring it out, and no one is listening.
No one is listening.
Now, perhaps
instead they feel threatened.
Because I'll come back to all of that, especially when we talk about politicians and looking at your agenda, talking about what you hope to do for the economy, but possibly so. I still want to go back and ask what exactly they did wrong after your administration, because a lot of Nigerians are still talking about the pain they went through, looking at the exchange rate between the naira and the dollar, looking at a whole lot of things.
Let me now tell you what went wrong. Good. Let me answer that question. 3 things went wrong. 3 things. Number one was Nigeria's structural dependence on oil for the past 40 years. That is not something that is the fault of only the Muhammadu Buhari administration. It's just one of a long line of administrations that have failed to diversify Nigeria's economy. Let's be clear. That's number one.
Even when we heard about Operation Feed the Nation and a couple of other...
Forget about slogans. I'm telling you, we know the reality that 90% of Nigeria's foreign exchange earnings have come from oil for the past 40-something years. We know that 70-80% of Nigeria's total revenues have come from oil. And that has made this country very poor indeed. Because you cannot rely on a natural resource solely and expect that your country can become wealthy from that. You must turn it into value? How can we export raw petroleum and then import refined petroleum products and then subsidize the importation of the refined petroleum product because the politicians want to pretend to the citizens that they are blessed, quote unquote, with oil and that oil is cheap? Do you see the problem? So first of all, the reliance on oil. Second, we were unable to build buffers and savings for the rainy day, despite the central bank's consistent admonition to the politicians that you cannot carry on this way. They did not listen. Obasanjo, when he left in 2007, the excess crude account had about $22 billion in it. And that was after the global financial crisis, when the central bank had spent a lot of that firepower in order to maintain the stability of the naira and the stability of the system. Now, despite $100 oil, despite $22 billion in the excess crude account, by the end of 2014, which is the end of the Jonathan administration, pretty much, the excess crude account was down to $2 billion only. The politicians had blown it, both at the federal level and the state level. Some of the people who refused and argued against savings today are kingpins in the APC government.
Yeah, I think history really,
exactly.
we know that. We saw them then on live television talking about the need for them to disburse those monies to states.
Exactly. So that's number two. I'm taking this in a very clear order so that Nigerians out there understand what went wrong. First, the reliance on oil. Second, the refusal of the politicians to save. Third, the incompetent response of the Muhammadu Buhari presidential administration when the oil prices collapsed at the end of 2014 and going into 2015. And that was the most immediate cause of the recession. How did they fail? They failed because if you rely on the price of oil, if you rely on the price of one commodity, the money you earn from that commodity begins to determine the value of your currency, which should not be in a normal economy that is functioning well. The value of the currency should be determined by how productive the economy is and how it exports. That's what determines the value of the dollar, the value of the franc, the value of the yen, and all those things. It's not what determines the value of the naira. The only thing that determines the value of the naira is how much money we make from oil. So when the oil price begins to crash, people lose confidence in the currency. You see what I'm saying? So when this happened, of course, the value of the naira began to fall. Instead of responding by adjusting, allowing the naira to find its true value, because despite this, Nigeria is a big market for foreign investors. If you had left the naira and foreign investors, now feeling that they will make a profit, begin to bring in a lot of dollars, eventually the value of the naira will stabilize. This was not done. This administration insisted on a fixed exchange rate. President Buhari had already told us, campaigning for president, that 1 naira will become $1. How on earth this was going to happen, I don't really know.
Was that news? Because a lot of fake news around till date. I tried
there
looking
were reports.
for...
There were reports.
Yes, I understand
so
they were, because I tried looking for that, feed to see where he said that. I still really can't find that.
Well, there were reports at that time during the campaign. But anyhow, that's different. The issue is that President Buhari wanted the naira fixed to the dollar. And the central bank, abdicating its responsibility as an independent central bank, went along with him. That's where the recession happened.
When it should have been an independent voice.
When it should have been an independent voice, like we were during our time. President Jonathan could never give Lamido Sanusi an instruction on how to run the economy or how to manage the foreign exchange reserves. That's our job. The laws say that the central bank cannot take instructions from any outside body in the performance of its functions.
The presidency inclusive.
The presidency inclusive. In fact, especially the presidency. There are 2 or 3 things in the Central Bank Act where the president has a role. Outside of those things, no. The president has no business interfering in the functioning of the central bank. That's what happens in mature economies, and that's why their economies grow. Because if you allow politicians to interfere in the functioning of a central bank, they want short-term political capital, which will cause long-term economic sorrow. So when this was happening, the central bank now fixed the rate of the naira to about 200 to the dollar, right? What happens? Foreign investors stop bringing in money. scarcity of dollars. Once dollars are once you don't allow a market to function properly, once you begin to interfere, scarcity is what will result. Once scarcity comes in, black markets come in. So those who had, I'm coming. This is very important.
I know it's very important. Hold your thought there, Professor Moghalu, because now you mentioned black market. Because I recall what happened. Airlines and everyone, they stopped, they rejected the naira, and some news out there on the street was that sometimes some politicians, they profit from black market.
But that's
so
exactly
tell us more on that.
That's exactly where I was coming to. So with these black markets, two things happened. Corruption became rife. Anecdotally, we have reports of people with political connections to the government accessing dollars through the central bank at fixed rates. Then they will go out into the black market and sell it for 3-4 times the value, claiming that they're taking that dollar to import things. But no, they're just making a quick profit on the black market. Emir Sanusi himself was reported to have said that people sit in their gardens and make billions from the central bank.
Without doing nothing.
Without doing anything. So this is a government that is supposed to be fighting corruption, mind you. So when this happened, black markets, corruption, meanwhile, the manufacturing companies, which are supposed to be the primary constituency for accessing dollars to import raw materials inputs, could no longer access dollars. What happened? Their productivity went down. Start with productivity going down, they now began to lay off their workers. Massive unemployment followed, massive losses of productivity follows, and Nigeria's GDP tanked. This was the recession. In simple and layman's language, this is what happened.
As painful we went through that painful period, perhaps there must be something you must have seen rather, that you think that we're not out of the woods yet. Because if you say you come in with your own agenda, it means something is truly not right.
Let me tell you what I'm coming with,
Good.
which is very different from what has been existing. The secret of the prosperity of any economy is the philosophy behind the management of the economy. Now, for you to think in philosophical terms, you have to be intellectual. I'm sorry. There's something to be said for going to school. Okay? Now, you have to understand that it is the philosophy that guides the economy, that brings about the vision for that economy and brings about economic policy. So you take it step 1, the philosophy, step 2, the vision, step 3, the policy, step 4, the institutional framework in which the economy operates. In Nigeria, our politicians don't like to think. They don't think deep. In America, in Britain, political contests are on the basis of economic philosophy. You find candidates slamming at each other. My philosophy is better than yours. Not in Nigeria. In Nigeria's politics is empty, devoid of substance. So because of that, economic policy in Nigeria is just an ad hoc arrangement. And because of that, the economy cannot structurally be reformed. People are busy worshiping the small god of small things, oil price. So long as oil money is coming in, nobody wants to think. They just get that oil money and disburse it to mendicant states that have refused to be productive precisely because they can always go to Abuja and claim the oil revenues. This is why constitutional restructuring of this country is absolutely necessary. Without it, we're going nowhere.
So now you're defining the kind of restructuring, you put it on a name, because sometimes it's difficult for politicians to qualify the kind of restructuring we're talking about.
The economic argument for restructuring is absolutely overwhelming, because that is what will make our regions. I don't believe in restructuring on the basis of states. I believe that we should restructure on the basis of the 6 geopolitical zones, and there should be 6 economic zones. Each one of those zones has what we call economies of scale. They can produce, they can market, they can trade within themselves, they can manufacture within themselves, and they would be a viable market. But many states do not have that.
I'll take a moment. I'll come back to you. Yeah, we'll go on a short one. I will come back to you. We'll come back. We'll talk more on the philosophy and see how pragmatic and how real this can be. And again, one thing that I'd love to ask you is about debate, because I've just come to realize that Nigerian politicians shy away or run away from debate. That will be when we come back. Stay with us. Well, welcome. It's our home stretch with the candidate of the YPP, that's the Young Progressive Party, Professor KINGSLEY MOGHALU. And we've taken, a long trip going back, looking at what's gone wrong and how we can actually proffer solutions to all of this. Before that break, we're trying to look at the philosophy of the economy and how this works. Yes. Perhaps you should take off from where we left off.
Yeah, let me explain something. The security and the welfare of the people shall be the primary function of government. That's what our Constitution says. In reality, we operate a capitalist economy. There is a very strong private sector in this country. Now, how does a capitalist economy function well so that it creates wealth for the poor and lifts several millions of people structurally out of poverty and into the middle class? This will be my #1 focus as president of Nigeria. How do we focus on the poor and get them out of poverty and into the middle class? How do we provide jobs for the millions of our young men and women who are unemployed? So this is going to be my focus, and here's how we're going to do it. There are 3 things that you must have for a capitalist economy to thrive. #1 is that there must be property rights. People must have the right to own property fully and completely. In Nigeria, we don't always have that right, especially when it comes to land, because all the land in Nigeria belongs to the state. Citizens can only get a certificate of occupancy. This is economically limiting to how much the economy can grow. Because when you own your land completely and in freehold, in perpetuity, there's much more you can do for it. You can do with it, rather than just being limited to 99 years. #2 is innovation. When I become president, the Nigerian economy will move away from depending on oil, and we will make it an economy that is driven by innovation. Young men and women who are very smart invent things that can be very useful to the society, and we will make sure that those inventions are mass-produced and go into our local markets. We will also make sure that those inventors, their intellectual property, that is their right to the secret of their invention, is protected and makes them wealthy. So when you do that, and when you mass produce the products of innovation, the wholesalers are making money, the middlemen are making money, the retailers are making money, the inventor is making money. This is how the Western world became a huge, wealthy sphere in the world today. Now, when you do this, you now make the economy constantly innovating. And so you're not dependent on a natural resource. You're dependent on the ingenuity of the citizens. So constant inventions keep creating constant wealth, not a vanishing natural resource that one day will end.
So in all of this, in a way, this is also, like octopussy in nature, trying to also solve the problem of unemployment.
Yes, of course. The problem of unemployment is a major focus for me. And this brings me to the 3rd leg of the secret of capitalist success. The 3rd is capital. You cannot run a capitalist economy as we're doing in Nigeria without capital. How many people in Nigeria can access bank loans? 77% of all bank credit in this country is given out in Lagos alone.
77%.
Go and check it. The last study that I saw showed that this country is absolutely concentrated in terms of access to finance.
So my people in Ebonyi State,
God help them.
In Benin, in Damaturu,
God help them.
Sokoto.
God help them. Many of them cannot get credit. If you get credit from Nigerian banks, it's very expensive. Interest rates are high at about 25 or 30%. Why? 2 reasons. Interest rates are high in Nigeria because infrastructure is very weak. So if a bank has to run 2 generators to make sure they have 24-hour operational efficiency, they will pass the cost of those 2 generators into the loan. They're a business. They're not an NGO. Then #2, the other reason why credit is very expensive in Nigeria is because monetary policy, the central bank raises the monetary policy rate in order to fight inflation. One of the ways to fight inflation is by tightening the supply of money. When you make money expensive, then people are not spending it in the irresponsible way that they're spending it that creates inflationary pressures. And that is done mostly by our government, because all the money they spend, 80% of Nigeria's budget is spent paying salaries of civil servants. Do you see the whole problem of the Nigerian economy? Because it is supervised by people who don't have the understanding of what it
Professor
requires.
Moghalu, sorry to cut you there.
Yeah.
You know, I used to think that way.
Yeah.
I used to agree when I hear
Sure.
and I see those figures about 8 or 80% being used
Sure.
to pay salaries.
Yeah.
But when you now measure the cries of civil servants who are
Yeah.
being owed salaries,
They are entitled to their salaries.
So you now
That's not
ask
the issue.
yourself. So you now ask yourself, when you say this amount of has gone into the payment of salaries,
Yes.
and we have this huge amount of population also saying that we've not been paid.
But that's because the politicians
Then you'll be asking,
are
where's the
using
money?
the money they should use to pay salaries for other reasons. Have you not seen allegations of what is happening in Osun State? Have you not seen allegations of what happened in Ekiti State? When very close to the elections, civil servants started receiving alerts. Why were they not receiving those alerts before? So our politicians are reckless. They have no soul. And that is why I believe that the presidency of Nigeria from 2019 should be given by the Nigerian people to a visionary citizen who has compassion for the poor and who has the technocratic competence to manage Nigeria's economy successfully. It is no longer, it is time for something new, something different, and something bold. So back to the question of unemployment. As president, and that comes to the third component of capital I was telling you. Remember I talked about property rights,
Yes.
I talked about innovation. The third is capital. My government will set up a venture capital fund with 1 trillion naira. This venture capital fund, what will be its role? It is to pump capital that our citizens do not have access to.
How did you come about that figure?
Oh, because
1 trillion.
it's just a starting figure. It could be 2 trillion, it could be 3 trillion. But it's the minimum that it should be. 500 billion naira will come from the government. 500 billion will come from the private sector. It will be a public-private partnership. The private sector part of the partnership will manage the fund. It will not be managed by the government, so that politics will not enter it. That fund will be given in making investments in new businesses that will be set up by unemployed people. So Mr. Joe or Madam, Madam Biola or Bola doesn't have a job, right? But they have a good idea. So they make a proposal. The fund can now provide them with the equity capital, but the fund will become a co-owner in that business. So the fund may own 30% or 40%, and Madam Bola owns 70 or 60%. But she has started a new business without one dime coming from her pocket. She now has a job because she didn't have one before, maybe. And as the business grows, she begins to bring in maybe relative X, relative Y, friend P, friend M or L. 5 people, 10 people. The business begins to grow. All those people most likely did not have jobs. Do you see how, if this is done on a massive scale, millions of new jobs will be created over a period of maybe 4 years, or the 4 years, which is the lifetime of an administration. I'm not telling you that it will be El Dorado 10 days after I'm sworn in as president. No. I'm telling you that I will set in place a system
And you know
that will break the limitations of our economy.
That system has to be operable in an environment that is safe.
Yes.
And that is where security comes in.
Absolutely. By the way, before I continue, all my plans for this country, I've put them out in this book. Build, Innovate, and Grow. My vision for our country. This is my manifesto, essentially.
How many pages do you have there?
It's 275 pages, and it's 25 visions. One part, the vision part 1 deals with leadership and governance. The second part deals with nation building. How do you build a nation? I've been a nation builder for many years. I spent 17 years in the United Nations, helping to fix broken countries like Rwanda, like Croatia, like Angola, and so on. So nation building, we address it here. How do we build a united Nigeria that is a nation, not just a country? Then the third part is the economy. And then the fourth and final part is foreign affairs and foreign policy. So I have a comprehensive plan for this country, and it's in this book. So you can hold me to account when I become president. I'm not going to say it wasn't me who said it. It was only my party.
You know, looking at this book, what it then means that, well, you didn't just stumble on this. You've been planning.
I've thought about it. I've thought about it. When I began to think about the presidency,
How long ago was this?
2017, I made the decision that I'll run for president of Nigeria in 2017. And I made that decision for two reasons. One, watching the poverty in this country, it just broke my heart. And I said to myself, what does my success as a professor, as a former deputy governor of the central bank, as a former United Nations official, what does this all mean when all around me you have people who are poor, desperately poor? I go and give a lecture at the Institute of International Affairs in Lagos, and I come out, 100 people are around me, crowding me, asking me for transport money. It breaks my heart. And I said, enough. I don't care anymore. I'm going to offer myself sacrificially to contest for the presidency of this country and see if we can actually change the direction of Nigeria. Because the direction in which the politicians are taking us now is a direction to nowhere. Poverty is rising, unemployment is rising, the population is rising.
I would like to hear you speak to Nigerians on what, plans you have to solving the security problems.
Let me tell you how I'll go about security is as follows. The best way to address security, I always say something. If you cannot conceptualize it, you cannot execute it. The first thing is the mind. The secret of development and progress is the human mind. And that is why I say to you there is something to be said for somebody who is intellectually sound and has the political will to take the necessary decisions. Security. One, I will take a multidimensional approach to security. Security is more than Boko Haram. This government focused on Boko Haram. The headsmen came and became even worse than Boko Haram. There are other dimensions of security. Cyber security, our computer networks in this country. The fact that people are so poor and are jobless and their numbers are rising is a national security issue. But nobody is talking about it. So these are all the dimensions of national security. We will now examine them and prepare a plan. Number two, I will bring a professional approach to national security leadership. The current national security team in Nigeria, the leadership of it is based on parochial considerations. It's not based on professional considerations. Over 99%, nearly 99% of the leadership of national security institutions in Nigeria come from one part of the country. That tells you that the leader is not serious about securing Nigeria. The person who has ultimate responsibility is more interested in giving advantage or in placing control and power within his own ethnic kith and kin. And that is why Nigeria is not secure. So, I will bring a more professional approach. Third, I will bring out a new reform of Nigeria's borders. How do we control our borders? People just stroll into Nigeria from foreign countries and become Nigerians, including allegations that they sometimes have voters' cards and vote. This is happening in some parts of this country, and everybody knows it, but nobody will talk about it. That's because we don't have border security. So our security as a country, we claim to be a sovereign country, but our borders are not secure. Yeah? That's why a certain president in a certain part of the world said, look, all these Mexicans coming in here, I'm going to build a wall. And it became controversial. But he was defending the interest of his country. Do you see what I'm saying? The final thing about security reform is that I'm going to set up a new police force of 1.5 million men and women. They will be trained.
I love it anytime I hear the word the police.
Yes,
tell us more. A new police force.
Oh, yes. Let me tell you what I'm going to do about
You want to get the present police force sacked or what?
Oh, no. The fact is we don't have a present police force. That is something that exists in theory. Let me tell you why. You have 350,000 policemen in this country for a population of 200 million. Now, out of that 350,000, about 1/3 of them are guarding VIPs in their homes. Politicians, following them around in convoys and terrorizing people on the streets. Are they protecting you and me? No. They are protecting our political overlords who have kept us poor, and in return for keeping us poor, they deserve the protection of the police. So, now, another 70 to 80%, we've had reports, they are ghost workers. So maybe you have, in reality, 200,000 policemen. They are ill-equipped, they're not well-trained, and they're not well-paid. So all they do is just line up on the streets, waiting your carry. My friend, your brother, they here, drop something now. Is that how a country can be secure? That's why I say we need a new police force. We're a big country, and we have lots of security challenges. So we are going to recruit 1.5 million new policemen and women, and that's new jobs. So maybe if you don't have a job, you might be thinking about the police force in Kingsley Moghalu's presidency.
But again, Professor Moghalu, do you think that the police force, as presently constituted, well, would welcome any kind of,
it is not
change? Because if everyone is talking about the pain and the problems of the police as it is at the moment.
Suleiman, I am a leader. Go and check my track record. I don't give excuses. I am not looking for the permission of the police as president to reform the police. It's my job as president to secure Nigeria, and I will do it regardless of who doesn't like it.
I'm running out of time. I just can't believe that it's almost an hour we've been having this conversation. But one thing I love so much, and being an uncle, for over 2 decades, I've always asked this question of politicians.
Yes.
Would you like to go on a debate with other contestants and speak about the issues or talk about Nigeria?
Yes, I have already challenged President Muhammadu Buhari to a debate, and I'm challenging President Muhammadu Buhari again, and I'm challenging whoever becomes the presidential candidate of the PDP coalition, if it continues to hold, to a debate. And I'm saying to President Buhari, you cannot dodge, Mr. President. You cannot hide behind the back of the vice president and send him to debate with presidential candidates. He is not the president. We elected Muhammadu Buhari as the president of Nigeria. He must come and answer to Nigerians about his performance in 4 years. That's what democracy is about. You've got to be accountable. You cannot say that you're a Democrat when you don't like transparency. You have refused to sign the amended Electoral Act, which would make the electoral process better and more transparent. You've refused to sign it for vested interests that are not the national interest. Mr. Buhari, the president, is now trying to hide behind the back of the vice president. You cannot send the vice president to debate for you. The vice president is not you. The vice president is the vice president. The president is the president. So a president must be able to come out and defend his performance himself. That is the mark of a mature democracy. And if you don't want to do that, I'm sorry, we are not going to accept it. We, the citizens of this country, are asking President Buhari, he must step out and debate us. He's going to debate me, and I'm not going to accept sending officials of his administration, because we did not elect those people, we elected him.
Why are you saying he's hiding at the back of another professor like yourself? Because if you're a professor, the president can say, Professor, go face another professor and tell him our plans.
That tells you that there is an absolute condescension towards the Nigerian people. I can never, as president, feel too big to be able to send a vice president to stand in for me with people who are contesting for the presidency. It is disrespectful of the citizens, it is disrespectful of the democratic process, and it indicates whether or not you have the confidence to discuss your competence or otherwise.
Let's close on this quickly. You've always used, words like when and not the conditionality clause of if.
Yes.
When you become president,
yes.
How sure are you of being the president in 2019?
I believe nobody is God, but I believe that the Nigerian people have had enough. They've had enough of the nonsense from politicians. We are in a state of slavery. The 2019 election is not an election just for the sake of an election. It is an election of our destiny. It is a choice between freedom and slavery under the political class. It's a choice between poverty and prosperity. It's a choice between security and insecurity. And that's why I want to make a special appeal to the middle class in this country who have sat back in their comfort zone for far too long and allowed these incompetent and visionless politicians to steal our future. Go directly to the poor people, bribe them with 5,000 naira, and keep coming back in elections. In 2019, our middle class should come out. Millions of them. Nobody is going to tell a professional, come and take 5,000 naira and vote for me. You know that that will not happen. But because our professionals don't participate in the electoral process, they allow these processes to be rigged by politicians. And that limits the possibilities of these professionals themselves. I am saying to every Nigerian, I am not a money-bag politician. I have a vision for Nigeria. support us financially. Support us financially, because these politicians are spending money, your money and my money, that they have stolen from our Commonwealth. I have not stolen it, but we need to change. If you believe that Nigeria deserves something new, something different, something bold, come to support us in the YPP and my vision for the presidency financially, so that we can do the things we need to do. We don't need the billions the crooked politicians need. We just need a fraction of it for logistics and to promote our message for change. Real change, not fake change.
Well, a fine place to switch off the gas here. Professor Moghalu, many thanks for joining us on the program.